Thank you very much and welcome everyone. Again, my name is Sam Blake, Application Specialist with MULTIVAC, and we have a very exciting topic to talk to you about today. It is unlocking higher protein yields with volumetric portioning. So we do things a little bit different at TVI, and I'm going to talk more about volumetric portioning in general today, about how it can help with yields, not just during the prep and the cutting process, but it can also make your lines much more efficient down the line through packaging, automation, and even case packing. So let's go ahead and get into it. So what is volumetric portioning? So volumetric portioning essentially is combining a meat press with a portioner. So pressing and forming meat in our industry, it's nothing new. People have been doing it for a long time because you see the value in being able to process a more consistent size and shape of raw material rather than dealing with the natural shape that you might get from your beef or your pork primals. So we're able to take a lot of that variability and take control of it and put it in our own hands. So we press and form the meat via a 3D process. But before we get into that, we press and form it, you have to have accurate cutting, okay? So we press, form it, we have accurate cutting, and then we have an increased profit example we're going to go through just to show you the impact that this can have on your business from small customers all the way up to the largest producers. And then we're going to talk about higher profit through your process. So volumetric portioning, you see we have a nice graphic up on the machine where we're 3D pressing the meat. So the product gets conveyed in, it gets raised up, you have a side pressing where it comes into a fixed width. So this width is determined based on your product and your application down the line, right? If you have a 14-inch tray and your primal is 15 inches wide, you need to be able to compress that down to 13 and a half inches, for example. So we're able to take that variability out, press it, form it in all three dimensions. So pressing and forming the width, and then we come down from the top. So the top as well, and this is all read off of a servo-driven press. So we're working off pressure and time to be able to form the meat in a way that is most beneficial to the process down the line, right? And now at the very end, and I feel like this is the most critical, we end press it. So this gives us a flat end on the front and also the back side. And the front and the end of the primals, that's generally where you have the most variability and you have the most yield loss due to trim cutting for quality and spec. So we're able to flatten the front and flatten the back end. And you can see at the very bottom, those are actual pictures of a unpressed primal and then a primal that we had go through our portioner and it's pressed. And I'm sure all of you in the processing world would much rather work with the product on the right versus the product on the left. Because you can see on that product on the left, we have two lines that designated there. That's yield loss. You can't cut a steak off of that. So that's going to have to get cut off the front and the back side to be able to meet your customer's quality specs, thickness specs, and weight specs. So that front and end piece off of every single primal is going to have to go to either waste or a lower value operation like grind or stew meat or fajitas or something like that. So being able to press and form and utilize that entire product from front to back is exactly what we're doing with volumetric portioning. So the product can be fresh, so around 34, 36 degrees. It can be crust frozen. We prefer it down to about a 3 to 5 millimeter crust around the outside that helps it hold its form and shape, or it can be deep chilled. So they all have their own benefits as far as the entire process, but volumetric portioning just isn't for frozen or crusted products. It's also for fresh meat applications, okay? And this allows us to be able to cut down to 1 millimeter because of the slicing accuracy and the consistency of the cut, and also all the way up to 3 inches. So on one machine through volumetric portioning, you can do a thin cut Milanesa in the morning, and then you could do a 3-inch chuck roast in the afternoon. So very, very flexible technology, and it's allowing to utilize that raw material from the beginning to end. And I think I saw the other day on the news that beef prices have gone up almost 20% just this year alone. So being able to utilize all of your product and put it in the most high profiting sector of your business is exactly what we're aiming for here. So more steaks going out the door, more high-end steaks going out the door, but also keeping your customer satisfied. So since we've pressed and formed it, now the cut quality comes into effect, because we can press and form the meat, but if we come down and cut it and it comes out as a wedge shape, you're not going to have accurate cuts. So maybe your customer has a 1-inch spec. It could be 1/2 inch on one end and 1.5 inches on the other end if you don't have a quality cut. So we're able to control the product from the back via the pressing unit, but in the video we're showing you as well, we're controlling the product at the face of it as well. So we don't have the product just hanging out over an edge and we're chopping at it. We're controlling that product from the front end and the back end. So that's what allows us to have that nice quality cut, so you don't get those thick and thins, those wedge-shaped cuts that, again, will have to be downgraded, moved over to another process, and you're losing more profit going out the door. So pressing and forming is just half the battle. Being able to have a quality cut from the front to the back, from the beginning to end of your primal, is absolutely critical to take advantage of this entire type of technology. So we're very proud to be able to control it. And this also eliminates end pieces. On some of the traditional laser scanners in the past, you have an end piece. So there's a gripper or a claw that comes in, grabs the meat, and feeds it through the cutting zone. But what has to happen to that gripped piece? That's more waste, right? And that's happening on every single primal that's going into the machine. So you could be experiencing up to 2 inches of loss just by that technology trying to control it. But with ours, we don't penetrate the meat with any claws or any needles. We just have firm control over the front end, the back end. We hold it in the meat press during the portioning. So the travel down to the blade is very smooth and very accurate. And then the blade technology allows you, again, to cut down to 1 millimeter all the way up to 3 inches on one type of equipment. So very, very flexible and scalable, from people that are coming from a hand cut operation all the way up to people putting tens of thousands of pounds a day out of their doors. So here's a quick example of one of the case studies we've done. And this is on the screen here. It is from a hand cut operation versus using a volumetric portioner. Okay, so we were collecting all the weights, collecting all the trim, and we did put a picture up here from a traditional portioner of the example of the type of loss that you have off of each primal. You think of a strip loin has that tapered end to the front, or a ribeye can be very soft and hard to really portion or form. So a lot of those get downgraded to other lower quality and lower profit. So here at the very bottom, you can see it's a loss of over $16 in profit per primal from going from a hand cut operation to using volumetric portioning. And that roughly comes out to 1 or 2 more steaks going out the door rather than being downgraded to a stew meat or a grind meat. So this is a very small example. Now think of the places that are running 16 of these primals per minute. Okay, multiply that over the course of an hour or course of a day, right? We're talking thousands of dollars in profit that is being lost by not being able to control the natural shape that you're dealing with, right? We can't grow cows and pigs in a box. So every one of them is going to be coming out a little bit different, right? It's going to have a different texture. It's going to have a different shape. And we need to be able to accommodate with that. Because with the increased beef prices, you want more steaks going out the door and less grind meat and secondary and tertiary products. So what are a few additional advantages of volumetric portioning? So we talked about forming it, we talked about cutting it, and that's where most people see the yield advantage. But as you all know, throughout an entire production process, yield can be lost after cutting and after the trim process, okay? Think about the portion flexibility due to the control of the product. I mentioned 1 millimeter all the way up to 3 inches. Now, if I told you you can do that off the same primal by zoning, the servo-controlled press is measuring that product, and you're able to do, for example, maybe a strip loin. If you're doing 8-ounce vein steaks off the front, we can program it to the first 27%. You take a 12-ounce strip loin, and then everything else after that, you have 1-pound steaks coming out. So there's a lot of flexibility built into this technology that allows you to utilize your labor better, but also keep those yields very, very high. And then the consistent steak and portion dimensions. It allows for downstream automation. And there's a lot of impressive automation around the trade show. We see a lot of great technology out here. But for automation, generally, you talk to the engineers, they want a consistent size and shape of product, okay? It's much easier and much more repeatable. If you're having a steak come out that's 3 inches in cross-section at the beginning and it's 5 inches in cross-section at the end, being able to package that efficiently can be a challenge. But with us pressing and forming to your actual package size, we're able to fill up that entire tray or that entire thermoform pouch via automation through belted loading, through robotics, through retracting bands, but it's going to be consistent enough. You know it's going to fit in that package every single time, okay? And then control the weight and thickness. So I guess the best way to say this, if you go to a lot of the steakhouses around the country, you have cooks, not chefs, to be honest with you, with a lot of the chain places, right? So being able to press and form that meat, we can meet their weight and their thickness spec, because that cook knows I need to put that ribeye on there for 2 minutes each side to come out rare, right? But if it's a 1 pound off the front of a ribeye loin versus the back end of a ribeye, they're going to be different thicknesses. So this keeps that very consistent and keeps your customer coming back to you to ask for more, because you can meet both of their specs and you're not dealing with the mercy of larger primals today, even seasonal variability. Cows and pigs coming out in the spring are going to weigh a lot different than what's in the fall. So we're able to adapt not just to the daily trends, but the seasonal variation as well. And then last thing, no need for downstream sorting units. If you look at some of the previous examples that I showed you on the screen, if you cut 1 inch from end to end, you can see you cut 1 inch from end to end on some of those primals, you're going to have an 8 ounce, a 10 ounce, a 12 ounce, a 16 ounce, back to a 14 ounce, back to a 12, back to a 10. And you either have to have people grabbing those off the line and scaling them, which that's another chance for yield loss, right? All of this can account for mishandling. The more times you have to handle a product, the higher the chance of that product being damaged and either 100% lost or being downgraded, right? So being able to control the product, we can meet that weight or thickness spec. So we can cut to weight or thickness on this machine and do both out of the same primal, because we're measuring the exact size and shape and keeping it in that exact size and shape during the entire cutting process. So we've eliminated the need to have complex conveyors where you have bins of 12 and 14 ounces and then people wheeling carts around the plant and sorting them to multiple different packaging processes. Streamline it. If you need to run 1 pound steaks today, you're running 1 pound steaks today. You're not running 70% 1 pound steaks and you have to deal with what happens with the other 30%. You're doing exactly what you need to make your business the most profitable it can be. So with that being said, thank you very much for your time.